Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
You're making me cry. I'm so emotional. This room is so full.
That's great.
So the emotion is from the happiness of this hard work that we put together. And you made me a big woman this morning when I was coming out, and my children were like, "What are you dressed up for?" I said, "I'm going to go interview the governor this morning." Now, how do you get to interview the governor? I said, "Well, you plan an event around it, and you make yourself the person who does the interviewing." So that's how I'm here. I just first want to say
thank you for this.
My daughter made that. She told her classmates, and they wanted to send them a card.
That's great.
And had they known about the new baby,
how about that?
They would have said congratulations.
Thank you. Can I just say, for those who don't read the paper or follow the news, it's not my baby. It's a grandchild, our first.
So the rumor starts here, right?
Exactly.
Well, I wanted to start the conversation just thinking about how I got started in my own journey, thinking about diversity and inclusion and those things that are complicated and confusing and language that you don't necessarily have to put towards it. I was an undergrad, and I was in a classroom called Managing Diversity in the Workplace, and I read an article by someone who's in the room, Peggy McIntosh, and it's called Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. And it brought a lot to the surface, and everybody has their own experience of the thing that makes you start thinking about ways in which you're privileged, ways in which you're challenged, ways in which people don't treat you the same. And that was the beginning of my journey, and I feel like I've been unpacking it ever since. So this conversation is about the march that we've been on in the past 5 years and the challenge that we've given Massachusetts employers to think about diversity and inclusion not as a special initiative that you do to check off a box and because it feels like the right thing to do, but the way that you make it part of your fabric. And so the Commonwealth has been on this journey with us, and we appreciate that. So my first question to you is, how do you get started in that? How do you start identifying people? What's your process? Who's your team? Can you share some of what you did to get going? And because you've been super successful.
Well, we thank you for that and for the work of the Commonwealth Compact over these 5 years. And I'll just say at the outset something I've been thinking about saying at the end, in the case we run out of time, and that has to do with, I think you have a job like this and you're getting, as I am toward the end of it, and I'll be done in a year and a half, you start to ask yourself what lasts? What lasts? And one thing that is true about diversity generally is that there isn't an end point, right? It's a continual, intentional journey, as you put it. And so beyond this administration, beyond the compact, long may it wave, the question is, what are we going to internalize? What are we going to make a part of our routines and our habits and our lives? I think when it comes to employment in the administration, we did a lot of outreach. We did a lot of asking people, inviting people to come and be a part of what we were trying to do and making it very mission-driven, which was not just about diversity, but was about the tenor of the administration. I made clear to the folks who were doing the hiring that was a part of what we were about, that we wanted to reach for and include the talent we know resides in every single community in the Commonwealth. And we got, I think, a lot of people expressed interest, by the way, not always ready for the assignment that they wanted, but we appreciated the interest, and then we went from there. Chose good people.
You're governor, so it happened like that, right?
Oh, no. So, I know from having worked in other large organizations, Texaco and Coca-Cola and so forth, that moving a large bureaucracy is a complicated thing, and even if this were a private organization and the CEO could just issue edicts, I also know that, from those experiences, if you don't win middle management, you're dead. You're dead. And in some cases, we had to change out middle management in order to help that happen. But mostly it was a process of persuasion. It took time, longer than, we're 6.5 years into this journey, and we have the results that the Chancellor was talking about and others. and I'm very proud of that. But we had people, some of whom are in this room as I look around, complaining a year and a half in that how come it wasn't happening like that. So it took a while, but as I say, it continues. And then as we get toward the end, or we've got through the reelect, really good people decide they want to do something else, because there's a lot of wear and tear that goes with these jobs. Not just minorities. I mean, across the board, not just people of color. And then you lose people, and you're worried about how you backfill in ways that both sustain the level of performance and talent, but also continue to improve on those numbers. So that's why I say it's a journey.
Well, in the room you have both individuals who are the talent that are in the organization, trying to figure out how they overcome some of the barriers, how they find mentors and who their champions might be. You also have the employers and the people who are in positions to make decisions about how successful any endeavor related to diversity can be in making decisions about what their investment will be. And so can you talk about specific challenges that you both expected to have as you're working with the various levels, and some that came up that you didn't expect?
How much time is allowed at this?
Can we give them the rest of the program?
So some of the things we expected. Well, let me start with some of the things we didn't expect.
Okay.
We didn't expect to be overwhelmed with interest. We expected to have a lot of interest, and we were glad for that. But we were overwhelmed. I think we had something like 3 or 4 times what the average interest had been expressed at the beginning of a term, and we wanted to make sure we were responding to everybody and culling and not just turning to the usual suspects. That took time. That's a happy surprise, but it was a challenge. I think that we had to get over a good government thing. Sort of predisposition we have, and I put it that way not to suggest it's not consistent with good government, but we had to get over the kind of insistence on a hands-off, let the hiring managers make their decisions, because in fact the hiring managers in many cases were making decisions in favor of their friends, their connections and so forth, and not this broader pool. So in order to get results, we kept saying to people, you have to be intentional about some of these outcomes. And knowing the depth and breadth of talent in all communities in the Commonwealth, I was confident, and I remain confident, that we could do that without any sacrifice in competence or quality. I think also it took me a while to understand that just how much latitude you have for hiring in state government. My government experience beforehand was in the federal government, and it's a lot more complicated to make changes at the federal level than it is at the state level. I guess the other thing was to realize, you really do have to have everybody trying to pull in the same direction, and. We had policy changes that I think just like in a company, you'd have changes in policy and direction. But if you don't have people who actually get that their job is to help move the mission and not just to hold on to their job, then you're not going to, it's just not going to happen.
It feels like so many conversations that I've had with a lot of people who are in this room about, I think the message that you're giving is an important one. It's not easy. This is not easy work. It is not fast work, and it takes commitment from both sides, so the bottom up, the top down, and then people making sure that it's happening. So in some of my conversations, and I'm amazed that this still happens today, but some of my conversations, hiring managers, HR directors might say something, or have said something like, we believe in diversity and inclusion. We just have a problem lowering the bar to achieve it. So having been in the position that you've been in, how would you respond? I know how I responded. How would you respond?
Well, we're in polite company, so look, That's an old bugaboo. Everybody in this room knows it's out there. I know it's out there. It's one of the, it's a sad reality that the expectation among many is that if the person is a person of color, they are somehow less able than their abstracted white alternative, without even saying who the alternative was, just that somehow or other they have more to prove. I will say that the upside of that, and you don't hear many people talk about an upside of that, but the upside of that is that person of color is likely to throw 120% into that job to demonstrate that they have what is it. There's absolutely there's no coasting. You just don't get that. I guess the practical thing though is, look, what is the city now? Majority, minority? I can't remember what the numbers are. We're about 50. What is it? 53%. 53% in the city. The country is becoming more and more diverse. Mm-hmm. You'd be nuts not to cast a broader net. You'd just be crazy not to do that if you really are about capability, right? So, and as I said, there's talent in every community. And then there's the point that is a classic one that has been made forever for people who are advocates of and champions of diversity in hiring, and that is the breadth of perspective that you get. And when it comes to public policy and the public good, if we're really serving the public good, then we better have all the voices in the public, including people who don't agree with you politically, on the team, and we've tried to do that too.
So that's a lead-in, actually. The next question I had for you is if you have seen specific advantages as a result of having pushed this agenda of having the best talent, whatever they look like, in the right positions.
Well, I think so. I mean, for example, we had, let me be clear. I'm not saying that the only sensitivity or sort of special touch comes from the people of color on the staff. That's been a way we've thought about all of the hiring on the staff. But if you take just one example, which was the implementation of healthcare reform, which went into effect the day I took office in 2007, it's a huge lift. It was a big, big deal to sort out all kinds of issues like affordability, for example, for where the threshold would be, where you weren't required to buy insurance, but you were qualified for a subsidized, either partially or in full, plan. And taking that input and getting off the, outside the statistics and really trying to understand what was going on in people's lives and having the instinct to ask those questions of different people in different communities in a very, as I say, intentional way, was Judy-Ann Bigby. I mean, who was our former HHS secretary. Just an absolutely brilliant medical professional and leader, but with a sensitivity about people and the breadth of experience in people's lives that made it important for her to do that, and I think as a result made for a successful implementation.
Why should we care so much whether or not our leaders represent the diversity of the community? If they're people doing the job, why should we care?
Well, I mean, that's sort of a rhetorical question. I hope nobody in here actually needs to be persuaded. Otherwise, you're at the wrong meeting.
Well,
But I guess I would just go back to something I said a second ago. I mean, just make it practical, just from a purely practical point of view. This city, this Commonwealth, and this country are changing. Now, you can like it or not. It's happening. And we are, I think, as a country, refreshed by the fact that it's happening. That there are so many more people from so many more backgrounds who are a part of our larger community. Now, if you are about performance in your organization,
right,
And like I said, you got to be nuts to sit on the sideline and say, I'm not going to take advantage of all that talent. I'm going to limit myself artificially to just who happens to show up or who my current associates already know. It's just, you're not going to get what you could get out of that organization. And I think, by the way, just to put one more practical point on it, the kind of competition that we're in globally, and by the way, anybody here who thinks that we are not in a global competition, think again. As narrow or local as your own initiative may be, believe me, there is somebody somewhere in the world who could probably figure out how to provide what you provide over the internet. Or in some other global connection. In some respects, we're in the most profound global competition in the history of the world. We can't leave any of the players on the sideline. We can't. If we're going to win, we're going to have to prepare, and we're going to have to get in it. And that means, that has implications, I think, across many, many areas of both public and private public policy and private behavior. For example, just take education. Just one example. We have, in this country, and I think in much of the world, educated to a bell curve, which basically meant, the folks who were super good and educated in elite ways or super accomplished in the public schools got the jobs in the offices and everybody else worked in a factory. That doesn't work anymore. You can't even get a job in a precision manufacturing factory without a different level of preparation today. And so that has implications for what our education system is about, which is precisely why I proposed universal pre-K. Not for some, not for just the folks who live in Milton, where I live, but everybody, because it has a high impact demonstrated by research over a long period of time. So we got to start thinking about the implications of what this country and our local communities are becoming, and to plan for that, because it's in our interest to do so.
You can imagine, it's just like people swarm to your own policy stuff whenever they have your ear for 2 seconds. The diversity conversations are just, they're intense. And so just responding to what you said, I hear a lot from individuals who say, well, if the world is really truly changing and the demographics are trending like you say they're trending, it'll just take care of itself. Why do we need to pay attention to this if it's just going to happen?
Well, for one thing, we're Americans. And Americans almost never leave anything we think is really important to chance. We never do. When we said it was important to educate people, we created public schools. When we said it was important to settle the West, right, we created the Transcontinental Railroad and land grant programs and so forth. When we decided that equality was important, not just a rhetorical point, but actually important, we freed the slaves, we gave women the right to vote. We don't leave what we think is important to chance. Now, if we think this is important, be intentional about it. I think that's a cop-out, that one, about how it'll all take care of itself. I guess I'd also say this, I'm a capitalist, but, and I describe myself as a pro-growth progressive, but I'm not a market fundamentalist. Mm-hmm. I do not believe that markets always get it right, at just the right time. Mm-hmm. I think there are things you have to do to make sure that the market gets it right. So when I say be intentional about it, I'm not saying, let's have 5 out of 10 positions reserved for these sorts of people who represent these sorts of communities. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is that if you want a different outcome, you've got to do some different stuff than just waiting for people to show up. You've got to go out and recruit and invite and encourage and ask people to imagine a different kind of assignment than they might have imagined for themselves.
Well, speaking of different, I know you're not done, but looking back at what you've done so far, is there anything you would do differently around this?
I think my team would describe me as an impatient governor, and as impatient as I acknowledge being, I would have been even more so, or even less patient in terms of staffing up. I mean, remember at the beginning, in the first few months, I couldn't get out of my own way. We had. I don't actually think it was a hanging offense to hang drapes, but I didn't then, and I don't now, or to buy a car that I think 4 out of 5 other governors drive. But that was it. That's all that was happening, at least out in front. And then behind the scenes, I was trying to figure out actually what the budget said, and how to read it, and how to put it together, and how to make it actually drive our policy agendas. So the business of staffing up, I mean, apart from just the folks in the immediate governor's office, was slow, right. Slower than I would have liked. We hit the ground running with a really fabulous cabinet, but we didn't go a couple steps deeper, sub-cabinet and sub-cabinet, before we got there. And I think the period of transition between election and taking office, whatever that is, what is that, 6 weeks, 2 months, something like that? We might have used some of that time to go a little bit deeper. I'll just say as a partial explanation for that, we also wanted to give a chance to the people already in place to demonstrate that they were ready to, be a part of this team. In fact, they had a lot of institutional knowledge that was important for us as well. So I think we might have struck a slightly different balance than we did.
Super helpful. Is there anything you want to share about what we can expect for the rest of your tenure in this administration?
Well, I'm gonna run through the finish line. I am going to finish. Let me just say, I am not. I am.
Yeah,
I have spent. I appreciate your applauding that. At least most of you. It's funny. I feel like I have spent 6.5 years telling people that I was actually going to do the job I was elected to do, which is bizarre. But I think probably has something to do with the experiences we have had in this Commonwealth for a long time. Pretty soon I fully expect that most of your and the rest of the public's attention is going to turn to the campaign for the next governor and other offices. And while you're paying attention to that, I'm going to still be trying to push for a modest increase in revenue so that we can invest in education and transportation in meaningful ways. I know, and you do too, that those sorts of things are about both improving our quality of life, but also growing jobs and opportunity. You know it. You know it. And I actually think the legislature knows it too. Right. But they need to feel like it's safe to do so, and wise, and timely. And I'm going to continue to push for that. We need we need a fresh look at our sentencing laws, our criminal sentencing laws. This business of warehousing people who commit offenses, particularly nonviolent drug offenses, is a failure, and in my view, doesn't really do much for public safety. And I think we got to be smarter about that. That's another sensitive issue. From a political point of view, we'll continue to work on that. I hope that what Georgianna, you and others know we have been trying to be about is this notion of generational responsibility. That we're supposed to make decisions today that are not about the next election, but the next generation. And I feel like that's that short-term focus, that quarter-by-quarter management, was the thing that so worried me when I was in the private sector, and that I noticed have begun to affect the way we govern as well, and why I ran in the first place. And 6.5 years later, we can point to a lot of things that we have accomplished, all of which have been motivated by that fundamental view. And there are a couple more big decisions like that I want to encourage us all to make together, because I do think that they will leave a very much stronger Commonwealth than we found.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You can't move yet with Ira? As you know, we want to thank you for the hard work that you and your team, because I know it took a village within the administration.
Indeed.
And,
Thank you, Georgianna, and thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Poppy, Patrick, thank you for your wisdom.